What do other people think about me? It's a question that often crosses our minds, isn't it? But it's a question that often doesn't have a definitive, reliable answer. My name is Ollie, and on the Johari team, I recently decided to run a little self-awareness experiment, something that I learned when I was learning to be a counsellor. It's called the Johari Window. So the way it works is, if I was handing you the Johari Window, if we were doing this exercise together, I would hand you a list of adjectives, words that you would use to describe yourself. I'd ask you to then pick 5 or 6 of those adjectives. I'd ask you to send the same list of adjectives to your peers, people who know you, like friends, family, that kind of thing, and ask them to essentially do the same. So they would pick 5 or 6 adjectives. We'd take all of these adjectives and we would map them onto a 2x2 grid of 4 squares. So in the top left you have open, which are the traits, the adjectives that you use to describe yourself and other people use to describe you. And underneath it you've got the facade, which are traits that you describe yourself but other people don't describe you as being. In the bottom right we have unknown, which are traits that like nobody selected, you or your peers. And above that we have the traits that you are blind to, so the hidden traits, so traits that other people describe you as that you don't describe yourself as. So the benefits of this is that it gives you a clearer picture of how you're showing up to the world and gives you a clearer picture of the discrepancies between the two. So this is essentially a really useful...
Hold on a second, just let me step in here. So I found a little problem with the design of this experiment and I want to show you what it is. So here's the original test where you have this grid of traits and you pick 5 and then everyone else picks 5 for you, and this is what the result looks like. So it shows you agreement, things that you don't know about yourself, etc. But the problem I see here is that basically I think everyone's results are going to look pretty much like this because everyone picks only 5 things. So in my arena and facade quadrants here, I will have a total of 5 traits distributed between those two, right? So most people will have like 4 and 1 or 3 and 2 or something like that. And because there are so many other people answering this test, naturally there'll be the largest number of traits will be in the blind spot quadrant. I think this can create an illusion of disagreement that isn't actually there, right? Because it can look like, oh my God, look at all these things that I didn't know about myself that other people see in me. But I think what's really going on is there might be much more agreement about these things. We only disagree about whether this is in my top 5 or not. Right? So it kind of looks like, oh, I had no idea that people see me as caring and dependable and dignified. But maybe the real thing that's happening is we all have a very similar top 10, but the top 5 is a bit different. And the more people you do this with, the greater this illusion of disagreement will become. Because just naturally, the more people fill this out, the more adjectives will end up in your blind spot quadrant. And another thing about this is that I think that because you're only going to pick 5 out of, what is it, like 50 traits or something, it kind of makes it easy to stay in the comfort zone, right? You're not going to, it's easy to just not pick any of the like negative sounding ones and only pick nicer sounding ones. So the way I updated this is that I made it as a grid where instead of just picking 5 of the traits, you're rating everyone on every single one of these traits on a scale from 1 to 5. So you think of that person, right? This is the one for Ryan, and you look at this trait, is Ryan able? And you would go 1 if he's not able at all, 5 is if he's very able, and then 2, 3, 4 for in between. So you have a gradation. And the way I see it, it like brings out more of the truth because you can't just avoid rating someone on one of the traits that's uncomfortable. So you're getting a gradation across every single trait in the test instead.
So firstly, we had these forms where we rated each other on a scale of 1 to 5 across 110 data points. And because there's so many data points, that's why I had to split these graphs up. So this is the way we did it. The first 6 are what other people have rated you on, and this is all anonymous, so you don't get to know who rated you what. And the very last one is you rate yourself. So that made it easy for me to average out what the team thinks versus what I think. So if I go to this second spreadsheet here, so the team average versus me. And that's what I have plotted here. So let me show you. I just hit those unhide rows. So this is all the data. Each graph is plotting 10 points, 10 data points, except for the last one because there's 55 in total. So that's how I created these graphs, this team average versus yourself. So here you go. If anybody wants to do it, and I wish I could take credit for creating these radar graphs. The truth is that Google Sheets actually recommended it, and I thought it was a great idea because it reminded me of when you play FIFA and when you're switching out your players and stuff, they use a similar sort of graph to show you what dimensions the specific player or the character is good at and what he or she is lacking in and whatnot.
The most that the team thinks, basically everybody on the team thinks that I'm spontaneous. Why would they think that? Most of the team thinks that I'm brave, adaptable, accepting, intelligent. Little do they know, I'm kind of a dummy. This is what I think about these graphs. When it comes to the negatives, people are gonna say what they think, but they're not gonna say it the full amount. Perhaps that's because we don't know each other well enough yet, but a bunch of people on the team think that I'm simple, and I think that I'm way more simple. And simple as in simple-minded, not simple as in a minimalist. And they think I'm a bit overdramatic. True. Oh, it hurts. But it's true. There's an opposite thing going on here. With the positives, I look at myself less positively than the team sees me, and I look at myself more negatively than the team sees me. So maybe that's a takeaway. The people around you aren't as dramatic as you are when you're analyzing yourself.
When other people display childishness and foolishness, my patience wears really, really thin. There's also something I need to mention about this, right? So childishness in particular, I find this trait, I find this really interesting, the results of this test. So I don't view myself as childish. Other people view me as more childish than I view myself. So I have my own YouTube channel, and two of the most popular videos on that channel are where I help guys mature and stop being children, and I give direct advice on how to become a man instead of a child. So I find that really fascinating how, I don't know, man. There's something there. It's like a trait that's kind of in the background.
In one of the discussions we had after doing this test, something that also came up was about self-assertive. I rated myself as much more highly self-assertive than the average of the team. But interestingly, it's we were then discussing, well, what does self-assertive actually mean? And I think that's also one of the maybe weaknesses of the test, or an interesting factor in the test, is that not everyone will have the same definition of these terms. And so it might just be that the discrepancy there is more about semantics than about actual traits.
So I did the original Johari Window and Johari Window, and Shane's updated version. And I like the updated version more, but I do think it kind of misses some practical elements. So the Johari and Johari Window, you can just see these 4 quadrants and you get a kind of a simple, albeit flawed, visual interpretation of the traits that you you hide from the world, the traits that you're not aware of, that the world is, etc. So I think in terms of a visual representation, it's a lot simpler, but it does have its issues. Now, the thing I like about the updated version is it's more in depth, and it can tell you, it gives you a rating of each trait rather than just, this is what people think of you, you think you're trustworthy. And it's you see how it's very black and white, the original.
I would recommend this only if you have people around you who really know you, and maybe even people where you're a little bit afraid to get their feedback, because I think that's valuable. If you have people who are generally people pleaser and they give you ratings, they will probably not be worth a lot. I would say only make yourself the trouble if you really have a suspicion or something, because the simple one, the original one, that really doesn't tell you a lot because of its flaws that we discussed, and the extended one actually does take more time to fill out.
I think this is a great test to do, and I think it requires 2 things. It requires the right people to do this with, So you really want to do this with people who know you well and who are going to be honest, and it helps if you do it anonymously. And the second thing is that you have to be willing and interested in learning the brutal truth about yourself, and that is especially true for the updated Johari test. The original is like much more tame because you only pick 5 traits for each person, so you can just not pick the ones that are uncomfortable. Whereas in the updated one, you kind of get the brutal truth of how people see you across every single one of these traits, no matter how negative it is.